I don't know if this is the best thing to do, but this came from doing some performance testing and sort of checking the package sizes and whatever else. And sort of I threw out there, okay, why don't I just by default lazy load every route, and then in theory, like they would create packages for each route, and it if I'm pushing all the styles down to the component level to the page level, then it should help over time with some of the scalability and performance. Do you do this like where you are lazy
This
loading every
is one
route
of
by
the first
default, or do
things.
you not?
This is one of the first things I do in every application that I touch. I look at is everything lazy loaded by the router? Is everything load component or load children?
Mm-hmm.
And if it isn't, this is one of the first things I do because it breaks up packages like nothing
Yes.
else, and you only load what you need for this page.
Exactly. Yeah. So I felt like it was the right thing, but I hadn't done this before. This is not what I was doing before. I just loaded everything in one big package, which is obviously not ideal. So it definitely it helped tremendously. Actually, it was huge
It
performance
is.
wise
This
once I moved to
is.
this.
Yeah. This is a huge win. The problem is, well, problem. If your application grows bigger and bigger and bigger, and you are reusing more and more components, um, you might end up with big bundles anyway because you are sharing a large part of the code through most of your components anyway. And then you enter this thing like, hey, am I going to break up this thing or not?
That's a good point. I'm not going to dive into it right now because that'll be a whole another 20 minutes of talking about this.
Yeah.
But I did, when I started thinking about this, make a conscious decision to move away from like one common service that was used for some particular piece of functionality that had like a lot of things that it did. That it was in, and it was imported. The same service was imported everywhere or whatever. And what I realized is like, actually, I should probably break up that service into like four different services that are more specific because you have that benefit then. Because when you break it up to those four, then the pages and components that need it will use that. And when it does this packaging, it'll become more efficient. So I've started to like actually build smaller shared services as a result of this.
Yes, that is a good approach. I'm always saying build something that has like one responsibility. If you have a service that has like two or three responsibilities, just break it down into two or three services, even if they are overlapping, because probably not all the pages are going to need all of those things. And even if they do, it's easy to think about those things if the concerns are separated. I'm seeing more and more the most important thing you can do in your application is breaking up your concerns, separate your concerns, and make sure that everything is dealing with one thing and one thing only.
Yeah, and somewhat related to this discussion is I can't wait for the Angular version 19 feature for incremental hydration. You can basically defer the loading of on the client side certain components until they're actually needed, and so you end up with essentially the server view for the initial load especially, and the timed interactive, and everything is just so much faster. It's already more efficient by doing this stuff because the client side package is definitely, I've gotten it pretty small because of these things that we're looking at right now. But once I can utilize incremental hydration and I can defer some kind of components within the
Yeah,
pages.
defer is the next step because this helps up breaking up your application in futures, and in futures basically your a route is a future in your application, but the defer thing helps to break up your components into subparts, and that is even more granular. So that basically means that, hey, if I have this island in your, I call it an island, I have this part in my page that is not always in view, then you basically should defer it and lazy load it when it is needed. The hydration that is coming along basically means that you can hydrate this thing on the server and then send it over, which is even a step further than we are talking about now. You have client-side hydration where you basically say, hey, I'm going to load this component and render the component on the client, which is what we already can do. And in version 19, we can say, hey, I want to do this work on the server and then send basically a piece of HTML to my client and be done with it. and then the client needs to rehydrate the data for the components that are in there, but you don't need to rebuild the view, which makes
Yep.
sense, and it can make a big difference.